Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Relentless Growth Podcast. I'm Jack Maher here with my good friend Chase Calhoun. We're excited to be with you guys today. I'm coming to you from Spring Hill, Tennessee. Chase is in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we're going to start out every episode like we always do with a win. So, Chase, what's your win for the week, and just a little bit of an update on what's going on in your world?
And I think a big win for us. We're bringing on a new construction project manager. He starts actually this morning. So excited to get him on and involved. I don't know that he fully knows how much we got going on and how much he's getting ready to step into. So I hope he's ready to go. But it'll be nice to get some help and excited to add somebody to the team. And then just updates. We're still plugging away on a lot of these infill build to rent projects that we're working on. We just started a handful more, but we actually just tied up a little piece of land. So we just put 6 acres under contract this last week, and going to start the process for where I've taken through rezoning. So we're hoping we can get it rezoned to allow for duplexes. So excited to get that rolling and do something to more density in one spot instead of all this scattered site infill stuff. Will be a kind of a breath of fresh air, but probably a little ways out before we get close to start on that. How about you?
No, that's awesome. Density, that's makes everything a little easier. And harder, I guess. But, well, in my world, on a quick personal note, since the last time we filmed an episode, my son is officially crawling. And so that's both amazing and terrifying. Now you turn around and he's at your feet everywhere. So that's fun. But then from the work standpoint, we're here just south of Nashville. We build new multifamily. Honestly, we've had a lot of tough things lately. We've got we've got roadblocks at almost every project, and in the city we're in, Spring Hill, Tennessee, they've proposed a moratorium, and so it's one of those weeks where it's not all fun and games in real estate. It's a week where I'm like, I don't know if there is a win out there right now, and there will be. It'll come back around, but we've got. We're developing 3 different sites right now, and we've got things standing in the way on each one. And then, we went for a rezone last night in the new city, and that didn't go well so far. And so, this isn't, but that's the truth of what we do is that, it's got on Instagram, real estate's real fun and it goes well all the time. But the reality is it's not the case. And so this is one of those weeks where it's a little tougher than normal, but, we're going to get through it and fight through it, and we'll keep going. But just to be honest and open with everybody, that's kind of where I'm coming into this week.
Yeah, it reminds me of Alex Hormozy. I think talks about this a lot. I really like some of the stuff he says, but he talks about just kind of framing that in a way that like it's hard. And this is why other people aren't going to do it type deal. So it's like you could sit here and tell somebody exactly how to do this stuff, but because it's hard and you have weeks like this, it's just like most people aren't going to even try because it's tough. But it's just kind of getting past it or whatever, which you will. That's why just kind of waiting it out and getting through it is the whole point.
That's right. Yeah, I like Alex Hormozy a lot too. That's great advice. Well, to kind of get into the topic of our episode, we're talking about, which I think is fitting, we're talking about the hidden cost of real estate. And so, especially with kind of what's going on in the world today, I think it's a really applicable topic for everybody. But also I think there's some things that hopefully we can bring to people's attention that they're not thinking about when kind of starting down this journey where we can help them. So just to kind of start out with you, Chase, what are some things that you've learned or costs that you weren't expecting, or just kind of what were some things starting out that you kind of realized on the cost front that you weren't thinking about going in?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of them. It might be kind of cool just to go back and forth and kind of see what we can come up with. But when I think back to like even when I first got started, so this one might be one that's super applicable to people like just getting started out. It's just holding costs and general expenses. Like it's easy when you get into like, hey, I want to flip a house or I want to do a burr or whatever. It's like you sit down and you spend all this time and this energy and you map out your budget, how much you're going to buy the property for, what it's going to cost to do the construction rehab project. But it's like you completely forget about the loan payments. So like interest, whether it's interest only or principal and interest payments, which sometimes can get real expensive real quick. insurance, whether it's builder's risk or just property insurance. And then just other small stuff that I think, like, at least for me, I missed earlier on, like stuff you wouldn't think about, but just like utility deposits and all these other little associated fees that come with doing a construction project. So for me, it's just those really basic, like, holding costs. And so adding that to your budget earlier on is that those are hidden costs if you don't pay attention to it. Like if you're on a tight budget, like you can run out of money real quick if you miss those.
No, I think that was actually coincidentally going to be my first one too. And I think the only other thing I would say, especially, coming off of what's been going on in our world, you've got to plan for the worst. Even when you're accounting for those costs, things are not going to go according to plan. Your timeline, whether it's a construction timeline or a rezoning timeline or an X or a Y or a Z, you've got to plan on it not going well. And a lot of times those carrying costs are what kill you. You get a 3-month delay and you're carrying a note or a property or insurance or whatever it is. And so a lot of times that's what gets people. It's not that they didn't do a construction project at the right cost or come in at the right cost. It's just things didn't work out on the back end. And so I think those carrying costs are a huge deal, and it's something I don't know if people talk about. And so I think going in, having a realistic expectation and then realistic timing expectations as well, and having a buffer. And sometimes I think that may make it a little harder to get started, if you're trying to keep a little bit more of a cushion. But in a market like we are in now, where it's a little choppy, things could sell right away. They could sit for 3 months. I think it's more important than ever to be a little bit cautious on that so that you don't get stuck. Because like we've talked about a bunch in the past, the way that you're successful in this business is you're in the game long term. And you can't be in the game if a deal takes you out. And so there's a great book called The Psychology of Money. And he talks about how no one thing that you're doing should ever have the ability to take you out, whether it's a deal, whether it's an investment. And so I think having that mindset and that reality of, hey, even if this goes terribly wrong, I'm going to be okay, or there's another path I can take, I think is hugely important. So yeah, the carrying costs were going to be my first one. And the other one, just to lead in, I think you kind of touched on it, but I think insurance. And I think contrary to in the past, it's a little bit more in the news right now because it's increased so dramatically. And in markets like Florida and coastal markets, it's gone absolutely insane. But we're about as inland as you could get. Tennessee, we're not getting hit by a hurricane anytime soon. And we've had dramatic increases in insurance. And just different requirements that the insurance places on you, things you have to do on your property to make sure you're compliant. And so, and it's something where if you're buying a deal and they've got existing insurance in place, it may be at a dramatically lower rate than what you can get now. And so if you're underwriting a deal or if you're looking at buying something, making sure you go out and get your own quotes on something like that. Because if you buy it with the assumptions that you're going to be able to keep that same rate, it's generally not going to happen. And sometimes that's probably going to break deals. And but just knowing that on the front end, I think is a big deal.
Yeah, I would totally agree, and to kind of piggyback on that a little bit. I think with insurance, like with anything else, giving yourself a little bit of a buffer. So when you're underwriting deals, whether future or your current portfolio, like realizing this is our insurance cost today, but could they potentially go up a little bit, and just being aware of that. We had a situation like 2 years ago where we had that tornado that came through town, and we were locked in a lot of our properties for years with the same insurance costs. And it was like we had only one property that was damaged, but it was like literally the second we cashed the check, that final check from that claim, they dropped us, like canceled our policy immediately, which doesn't make sense to me because you think they would like want to kind of like keep the policy and recoup some of those costs, but they dropped us immediately. And then we were forced to go out and reshop. And it wasn't just that property, it was multiple properties by that carrier. And so, of course, when we go out to find new insurance after just having a natural disaster like that, even though it was very isolated to just one small area, our insurance costs jumped up quite a bit. And so it's just being able to deal with that. I guess the next one that I would do that I think it piggybacks right there with carrying costs and insurance is taxes. So property taxes. And it's like the same thing, like you said, if you're buying an existing building, like that's great, but you can't necessarily use that current property tax amount, especially in Arkansas, even if it was the same amount for 20 years. The second that deal, not the second, but right after that deal changes hands, it's going to get reassessed at the new value that it sold for. So if it had previously sold for X and it just sold again for this much, you're going to see it get reassessed and the value go up. Another thing that we ran into personally that like you don't think about is we a lot of times will buy distressed properties and heavily improve them. So not only is it exchanging hands, but we're doing huge improvements to the property. That plays into the reassessment. And so it's literally, we bought small apartment complexes before, did these huge rehabs, increased the rent, which was great. But it was like that next year we got the tax bill, and the tax bill was like triple what it was for the previous owner. And so it's like you really got to be aware of how the property taxes could be affected just by when you purchase it or by rehab. It's a little bit easier with ground up new construction because I feel like you can get a baseline of what the tax is. And the taxes are just going to be high right out of the gate in that case. And so it's like the maximum they can charge is what they're going to charge. But that's definitely a hidden cost that if you're not careful, it might sneak up on you.
Well, and I think taxes is a key one on a lot of things. I think on a rehab or new construction, there are a lot of taxes or fees that you might not be thinking about. If you have a sewer tap fee or a water tap fee, that's not going to be in a subcontractor's bid. And so you could bid out a whole project and have a really good cost basis for what others are going to charge you. But your municipality, you may have a couple grand in other charges that you're not accounting for in that budget. And so just fully understanding, what is there and what isn't there, I think is a key. And then to kind of piggyback on your tax thing, the other thing I would say there is you've got to also think about at the end of the day, if you're flipping houses, it can be an incredible way to earn income, but you've got to make sure you've got your tax situation in order on the back end, because that's active income. And so it's going to be as highly taxed as anything you do. And so, you can have a real rosy deal where, whether depending on the state you're in, you've got federal, state, all these applicable taxes. And so, a big windfall could be cut in half overnight. And on something like that, making sure you've planned for that tax, you're setting aside for the tax. And so I think that's one of the things that gets people as well is they feel like they've won big when they flip a house and they make a ton of money, and they have. But if you don't plan for that back end or figure out a way to offset those taxes, then a lot of that profit is going to get eaten up by the government. And so I think that's another thing that some people don't calculate on the front end to say, besides my profit, what does it really look like at the end of the day? What do I need to set aside to be safe there? And so I think that's another consideration as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And even with the rental property side, if it's not a flip and it's not active income, you also have to be aware of depreciation. So like real estate can be extremely valuable for saving money on taxes by using things like accelerated depreciation or regular depreciation on rental properties. But you need to be aware if you have a rental property where you use that depreciation and you decide to sell it, what is that if you're not going to do a 1031, what's that recapture going to be? And then weigh that. Like I literally know guys who have like fully depreciated a piece of rental property and they could sell it and make a profit, but they're like, unless I can 1031 it, I don't want to do that because the tax bill is going to be so high. It's just not worth selling it. You briefly mentioned like utility hookups. Like that's another thing that's worth being, especially on the new construction development side. Like that's something that's worth, like you need to be very aware of, depending on where you're at. And so I'm very fortunate, like here in Central Arkansas, like the hookup fees are almost like laughable compared to some other places in the country. In a former life, I spent a very short amount of time working for a water company in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. And their water, like new water meter install fees were just like would blow your mind. Like it was insane. compared to here. And so it's like a single family home, a 5/8 or a 3/4 inch water meter that here would be like $750 for the hookup fee, and to have like the utility company come out, tap the main, and install the water meter is $750 here. In that area in California, it was $22,000 for the exact same thing. And I always joke around, that's for like 4 utility workers or 3 utility workers to stand around and watch one work for an hour. Was $22,000, and you go into the multifamily development, so you start getting into larger, like dual 2-inch meters for one apartment complex. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars to have them install that. So if you were just looking at like a project, you're like, the land's going to cost this much, it's going to cost this much to build the buildings, but you forget about the $400,000 water meter on the front end that could sneak up and get you real quick. So I just say those utility fees, make sure you understand that the area you're in, that you know how much they're going to cost on the front end, and not get surprised by that.
I think that's a great point. And as well as that, yeah, we put in, I can't remember off the top of my head, big 6-8-inch meters. Yeah. And usually associated with those bigger meters, you've got base rates. So like our water meter in an apartment complex, through construction, whether we're using that much water or not, our base rate was like $10,000 a month.
That's crazy.
And so it's crazy, but it's also something to easily overlook when you're running your numbers of, hey, I'm not going to be using very much water, so I don't need to plan to pay any water bills for the first 6 months or through construction or something like that. And so, but with certain services, even gas, which we do gas on single family houses, and there's a minimum charge once those are hooked up. And so, sometimes the numbers can be small, but it all adds up at the end of the day. And if you've got a couple of those things that you weren't expecting, and you've got minimum charges that you've got to pay each month, then it can all add up. So I think getting a full utility picture is really critical just to the deal's success long term.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That makes sense. I think another thing that ties into all this stuff that we're talking about, that's kind of a hidden cost, that not a carrying cost, but just like I would call it like a soft cost, would be permitting. And so again, when you're just getting started out, like at least when I was first getting started out, we were doing more minor rehabs and stuff. We weren't necessarily going that full route. But now that everything we do is permitted, and so it's just good to know, where you're looking at on permit costs. So again, if we're building, and like you guys, if you're building single family homes, the permit costs aren't, too crazy expensive. But obviously when you're doing large scale projects, they can probably get way, way expensive. And then even on smaller projects, it's just one of those things, like if you have a tight construction budget, but you forget to factor in the cost of a permit, it's all those little, missed charges or fees or whatever that are required can really start to add up on you.
And just to give an example, I mean, when we build in Williamson County here, just south of Nashville, we're not in California, we're not anywhere crazy, but we've got some pretty high school taxes. We have a great school system, and so we've got high school impact fees associated with permitting. And so on a single family house, before we put a shovel in the ground, permitting cost us over $30,000. And so, I mean, you wouldn't think, thinking Tennessee, thinking low tax state, you wouldn't think that's true. And so, understanding the county picture, the city picture, the impact fee picture, there's like 6 different ways you get charged on a house, by square footage, by this, by that. And so understanding that full picture really is critical, because that could be, if you're building a small house, that could be your profit right there. That's out the window with that permit fee. And so, just understanding that. And the other thing I think is understanding the timeline on permits. Some places are stricter than others, but sometimes, a permit lasts a year. Sometimes it lasts 6 months. Sometimes there's a renewal cost associated with it. Sometimes, depending on the situation, they're going to try not to renew that permit. And so making sure you've got your paperwork on the back end in order of, hey, when you call for a CO inspection, you've still got a good permit. It's still up to date. You're paid up on that, because, it's tough on the back end to correct stuff like that. And so making sure all the paperwork's in order all the way through the project, so that when you do get to the end, you can get somebody in there, get it cash flowing, or sell it, whichever it is. But that's something that a lot of people spend a lot of time on the front end, making sure their paperwork's in order. Then they build it, they do whatever, and they get to the end and they find out, oh man, I should have renewed X and Y and Z. And so keeping an eye on that stuff. Generally, you can go back and take care of it. But again, there's penalties, there's fees associated with it when it comes to hidden cost. And so keeping up to date on that paperwork is something that, nobody likes to do, but it's critical at keeping projects going.
I guess that kind of brings me to another one that comes to mind that's very closely associated with permitting, but it's knowing your local city requirements or municipality requirements. And so that I've seen that's got me a couple times by surprise, even recently. And I've seen it really just kill people's deals where they bought something and got in over their head because they didn't know the city requirements. And so, for example, we've had situations before where we bought and rehabbed what one city wouldn't consider commercial, but the city that we were in considered commercial. And then they required, for example, fire suppression. And so that's not something you could be literally the city next door and you would have just been able to rehab the building and gone about your day. But then being one town over, we're going to require a full fire suppression sprinkler system, which costs, anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000 extra. And so it's knowing those requirements on the front end so you're not getting surprised by those additional costs. And we even ran into it recently. We're doing a self-storage. We're basically rebuilding a self-storage facility. And we were just going to do one new construction building. And when I say it's a building, it's like a metal shop. It's not very complex. These are metal self-storage buildings. But we were surprised because the city made us go through full engineering, ADA compliance, everything you would get on a medical office building for a steel building. And so we were surprised by that. We didn't think that would be required. Had we checked with that city on the front end, we probably would have caught that additional cost on the front end. So it's just getting with the city, letting them know, I guess, what you're going to do and see if there's going to be any requirements and what you would expect going into it.
Yeah, I think those are both good. And to jump on your fire suppression one, my first project, which I talked about in a previous episode, was a duplex. And we knew it needed fire suppression. And so we were prepared for that cost. And then when we went to put it in, we found out that the fire hydrant closest to our building did not have enough water pressure. And so it couldn't support the fire system. And so we had to put in a couple 1,000-gallon tank. We had to build a little extra room on the outside of the building to house the tank, put a heater in it so it wouldn't freeze. And so it's just, and honestly, looking back, there's probably no way we could have anticipated that. And so kind of my last thing, and we had the same thing on a multifamily on a different, we were building on a hill. And when we got to the top of the hill, we were building 3-story multifamily, and we started getting a lot of complaints from people on the third floor that, hey, the water pressure is not keeping up with our usage. And so in that case, we had to install a big pump to support the entire site. But there's certain things that you can't plan for. And so just setting aside, a general contingency fund for the things that you can't anticipate and can't reason, because there's something on every project. And so, not running just so tight and so lean that if one bad thing does happen, it's going to kill the deal and make it difficult. And so I think we can probably list off 1,000 things that on deals have popped up last minute that we had to take care of. And so just having the wherewithal and the ability to handle those is another critical thing, because you're always going to have things that pop up. Nothing is ever going to be smooth. It's going to take longer. It's going to be more expensive. There's going to be a code change. We've gotten hit with that where, hey, the last house we built, it wasn't required. They changed to the 2018 or the 2020 code. And then it changed. We didn't know in enough time. And so we've done things wrong. And so there are all sorts of things that can happen, and just setting aside reserves on the front end to account for that.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And even stuff like just material increases, like if you budget something and it's been a year and then now you go back and there's been a 20% increase on your HVAC equipment. And same thing, like whenever we're doing budgets on stuff, we're always we're either putting a contingency in or we're just increasing. Like if we think that our cost is going to be X, we'll do across the board. We'll go 10% higher, and the goal would always be to come in at or below budget. And if the deal works, if with a little bit of increased budget on each line item, then it's something we're good to move forward with. And again, in a perfect world, we come in below budget. But like you said, it is almost always something that's going to pop up, and it's going to eat into that little bit of cushion that you gave yourself. And I always tell people, like, and I feel like I made this mistake just over and over again when I first started. Like, you can want stuff to be cheaper all day long, but at the end of the day, it just costs what it costs. And it's better to be realistic about what it's going to cost on the front end, and not get surprised. And I see it with a lot of new investors. So like, I want to do this rehab for $20,000 a year. Like, it's not. It's going to cost $40,000, and it is what it is. You can try to cut corners and save costs, but at the end of the day, it's not going to happen. You're better off being realistic on the true costs on the front end, and then you're not scrambling or getting surprised. You're trying to go back to the bank and ask for more money. You can just keep going with the project, even if these little unexpected things pop up.
Well, that's probably a great way to kind of round it out. I guess my last hidden cost or piece of advice would be, and it can be tough starting out. You're going to make mistakes when it comes to subcontractors and things like that, but cheaper is not always better. And so, going with the lowest bid may make your budget work the most, and it may be the most detrimental to your budget at the end of the day. If you have to bring somebody in to correct work or to do work to code or whatever it is, it's going to be way more expensive than the extra 10% you would have paid on the front end to do somebody who's got a better reputation, who you had a better feel about, whatever it is. So I think being real careful on the front end of who you pick, who you select, talking to people that have done work for them or that they've done work for. And so I think that's a way that a lot of people get into trouble, is going with the lowest bid on everything. And then a lot of times the lowest bid is the lowest quality work. And sometimes that's not true. And there are great situations where it works out, but not planning for that and planning for that to go wrong. And so I think doing a really close analysis of the quality of the work that your subs are going to provide is a really critical part of that process.
Cool. And it's quality and time, and it like circles back to those holding costs on the front end. One thing, like I personally used to use an electrician that was just slightly cheaper than the other electrician, and his quality work was fine, but he would always delay us. And it's like I would try to communicate that to him. It's like, hey, you pushed us off for 20 days now, and we've got holding costs. Literally, it's costing us money every day. We're not getting this finished. And so it's like, it's not just quality thing, but sometimes it's a speed thing. I would just been better off paying a little bit more to the guy that could have got it done right away and moved on with it. So I think all of it kind of circles back and it plays into each other.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, to me, I didn't think, I was thinking of one or two hidden costs on the front end, and the more we talked, the more we came up with. And so I think this was a really great episode, a great conversation, things that I hadn't thought about that Chase brought up. So honestly, I think this is one of our more valuable episodes that we've done. I would encourage people starting out to listen to this a time or two, because I would rather everybody learn from our mistakes than have to experiencing them yourselves, and there's certain things that will happen, but trying to figure these things out, it's tough, and it costs money. I mean, that's the reality of real estate, is every mistake you make costs money. And so if you can learn from the things that we're saying on this podcast, I think everybody will be better off. But what would kind of be your last takeaway, Chase?
I think that's the biggest thing, just learning from, and I even tell some of the guys that work for us, it's like, like I want people to learn, because you sometimes like doing things is the best way to learn, but at the same time, like there's no reason, like if they can take some of the mistakes we've made and save, like learning the hard way and learning the expensive way, like there's also nothing wrong with that. And so it's like, get that information, learn from our mistakes, and don't run into stuff and waste the money yourself if you can avoid it, for sure.
No, that's right. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in. This is the Relentless Growth Podcast. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please like us, give us a rating. That means a lot to us. And if you've got questions, comments, please reach out. We'd love to hear your experiences, good or bad, with hidden cost in real estate. And so let us know. We'd love to have a conversation, and give us a 5-star rating if you feel like it. Appreciate it, everybody. Have a great week.
Have a good one, everyone.